right, welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Yes, we've got Mr. Segun Ajayi-Kadir here with us. He is the Director General, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Good morning, and thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, good to see you. Let's start off with this. I mean, I know that there's been several things that, we all want government to address those issues. I've always highlighted those issues so that businesses can survive. By extension, people can have jobs. So what is the current situation now in terms of at least the general operating environment for manufacturers?
Well, to be frank, the environment is tough, just like most other sectors. And it's actually a global trend that we have seen in business. Generally speaking, after recovery from COVID-19, the geopolitics that we have seen, the wars, the tension, has generally impacted business. So generally there's a lull. But in Nigeria, we have had quite a number of reforms that came with this administration, necessary reforms, I must say. But they have thrown up issues that we needed to deal with quickly for us to be able to get the economy back on track, and for us to consistently work towards ensuring that those reforms lead to gains that they were intended. So I think this time are tough times that we need our thinking caps on, and for all hands to be on deck, particularly government cooperating with the stakeholders, so that we're able to go through the period that is obviously tough, not only for businesses, but for individuals in the country.
Government would always say that, yes, we're doing the best for the people, but the people they're on a different page. Ever since the subsidy removal, we've seen the cost of products, services in the market out there. So in terms of government cooperating with businesses and the policies that they're coming up, churning out, do you get the sense that they are really addressing the issues that they should be addressing?
Well, so I think we still need to continue to work with them so that they will address the issues that they need to address. There are quite a number of steps they have taken that indicate, quite frankly, that they are conscious of the situation we are in. But then the reaction to that, the policies, the steps that are taken to follow that, we still need to have some strong conversations that will ensure that we are all on the same page. Governance has to do with the private sector and the public sector cooperating and working together. We do not and we cannot afford the Lord and Master relationship. We operate in an economy where the private sector has a lot of stake, and the federal government or the public sector has a duty to provide for the overall well-being of the people. So there has to be this synergy for us to be able to make progress. There has been quite a number of reforms that this administration has taken, and whether we like it or not, is the way to go. So then how do we deal with the fallout activities? And I think that is what is very important. There is no doubt that we needed to float the rate, we needed to remove fuel subsidy, and all those ones are given. It will have definite negative fallout. How do we deal with it? How do we ensure that the businesses survive? And that can only happen if you talk, if you engage effectively, adequately, and truthfully, conscientiously, deliberately, intentionally, work with those who operate in that sector for you to be able to get the necessary feedback. You will achieve your objective faster, with lesser pain, and with less adjustment period, because everybody needs an adjustment period, government and the private sector.
With all of the experts we have in communication, you will think that we will do better when it comes to communicating, when it comes to intra-communication, intercommunication, as the case might be, because everything you have talked about now borders heavily on communication, sincerity of purpose. I'm going to go back to something which we saw, I think was made very prominent over the weekend. I do not know if the company is one of your members, Okomu Oil PLC. The managing director made a complaint, a very rather loud complaint, talking about how a company that pays so much tax, still has to deal with the challenges of insecurity, losing some of their staff to insecurity, and also having to fend for itself. I do not know if it's something that you came across, and I wanted to know how it is, because we know, and myself and my colleague here were speaking yesterday about how the greatest advertisement for all of the people whom the government of the day is trying to woo from abroad will be those who are already here locally. So I wanted to know if you're satisfied with how government already treats local investors.
Well, you are right. I mean, the best advertisement is a satisfied customer, and with all the trips, very good. Gives us a sense that there's government buy-in in terms of advancing foreign direct investment. So it's good for our president to do the communication. But at the end of the day, before you invest, there is no way you will not speak with those who have already invested and who already experience the domestic environment. And that's why you can never lose when you incentivize and support current operators. Insecurity is a major challenge. I can tell you, we lost about between 56 to 60% of our members in the Northeast to insecurity. They just stopped production. Northeast. And so when you want to see how it impacts your business, yes, when you want to see how it impacts on your business, you now look at the cost that you need to incur to be secured. This was something that many, many years ago was non-existent. We had local communities supporting industries within their vicinity because they are positively impacted. But even now, you have infiltration even from outside of the immediate community. And the frustration that the people within the community feel has made them to turn the other way. And so it increases our cost. I can tell you that some of us pay for security more than the taxes that we pay, because it has to be a continuous basis. I happen to have only recently visited the company you mentioned, and they had to dig a very wide and deep ditch outside their gates so that people do not infiltrate. And guess what? People still manage to fill up some portions of it to climb in.
Wow.
So it is a very serious challenge that we face. Insecurity is a disincentive to manufacturing, not just like any other business. And so government needed to step up activities. There's no doubt that this current administration is doing a lot. Some of us are aware of what is being done, but honestly, we need to do more. And there's a sense of urgency in this because we need all that we can muster to be able to get out of this process. Man had predicted that by the second half of the year, we'll see we'll see improvement in terms of our performance and in terms of the performance of the general, because we believe that the reforms and so on will have kicked in, will have gone past the stage of adjusting, and will have seen some growth. We still want to hold on strictly to that outlook and that projection because it's good for us and it's good for confidence. So government needs to see that everything interplays, including security, policies and measures, for it to be able to fully manifest.
Even I want to hold on to that promise. And I know, but only recently I was challenged. I visited a place and we're wondering how it was that, we're going to be dealing with subsidy. What exactly were, because everyone who looks at the issue of fuel and energy in the country, are you talking about electricity? Tariffs are going up. Are you talking about petrol? The price it's been pretty stable, but there's been some glitches in supply only recently.
Stable.
So there are conversations around it, and there have been questions as to, I don't know if man is also having those conversations with government as to whether it will come very clean on what exactly this situation is or how this current situation is actually affecting your own members. But then the big questions as to when it will be possible, for instance, and there are those who you speak to behind the scenes who will tell you, look, there's still subsidy going on in some parts of this energy chain. So the questions as to when will we be able, is it possible that we'll be able to do the energy sector without any subsidies? Big questions. People say, oh yes, we might be able to do that if our earning capacity is more. And if our earning capacity is going to be more, manufacturing will need to be a big part of that. And the big questions as to what exactly it is that we currently produce as a country that we can scale up. It was a very big challenge because when if you look around this room, for instance, you have to ask what exactly is made in our country. I don't know if, as manufacturers, you ask that questions. Do you challenge governments to say, look around your offices, look around what it is that you use as government? Are there any areas that they can incentivize the manufacturing sector to actually, be able to do something in the short term to the long term?
Well, first I want to commend your communication. I think you should be a policy advocate as well. That is what we have always spoken about. Incidentally, this president, in the first 1 month of assuming office, made it clear that he was going to promote domestic production. The manufacturing sector in Nigeria has continued to underperform. Not because we do not have entrepreneurs that have gone into manufacturing to be able to produce and advance the performance of the sector, but because of the binding constraints that the environment has continued to throw up. So we assumed that when the president made this pronouncement, he was committed to removing those binding constraints. I mean, that is a given. And he has consistently stayed focused on making those pronouncements. What is just remaining is for us to see his lieutenants, the policies that are emanating from government, to see it as consistent with the statements that he has made in such a way that we are intentional about any decision we take. So if government is committed to that, every statement that the president is going to make, we need to be benchmarked against that promise. So we wouldn't have a situation where costs of manufacturing will continue to climb. We won't have a situation where the fiscal policy and the monetary policies will continue to clash and then limit the performance of the sector. We wouldn't have things that we don't expect. We wouldn't have surprises that will spring up and more or less double back on the progress that we have been making. There's no doubt that some of these reforms will have promoted domestic production, but you are at a loss as to how to reconcile it with some other fillers that you are getting and even some policies that you are getting that constrains the sector.
Can you give us an example?
Okay, for instance, we've had, though it's been resolved now, and more recently, it's about the issue of increase in electricity tariff. Okay, because we recognize that costs cannot stay the same. And that's why I was discussing with my colleagues yesterday. We are not necessarily against increase in tariff. Let's face it, all prices have gone up. And those who supply power are business people. So their costs must be going up as well. It is not charity. Power is not charity. But then there are processes and there is what we call value for money. We need to follow these processes. We need to get value for money, and there has to be engagement as indicated in the law and in the guidelines and in the regulations. You need to follow this process. If you follow the process, the discos will be able to do business. The manufacturer will be able to do business. The ordinary Nigerian will be able to have power and live a good life. So it's not possible for the discos alone to be the ones that are happy. I must be able to buy power. I must be able to produce. I must be able to be competitive. I must be able to be profitable. And I must be able to operate.
Would you say that the current cost of power has given, I do not know, I want to imagine that manufacturers who might be on a special line, maybe they'll be band A customers, are the current costs prohibitive for your members?
Extremely. 250%. Where are you going to pass it? Power is somewhere between 25 to 40% of our cost structure, depending on how power intensive your production process is. How do you place 250%? That is, and this is coming at a time that you know what is happening to the interest rate, you know what is happening to the exchange rate, you know what is happening to inflation, you know what is happening to insecurity, which you mentioned, you know what is happening to multiple taxes and levies. It is too much. And it need not be this way. If we had engaged, if we had interrogated the process, because the cost that even the law itself requires the DISCOs and NEC to fix is not arbitrary. There are stages for conversation that has been set to ensure that the system only takes the cost that is tolerable. Because look, if I ask you, if you put me on band A and I ask you to disconnect me, where are you going to get the 206? I mean, there is also the need for us to engage. And I think that is the primary thing. We are not necessarily against any increase, but it has to be tolerable. It has to follow the due process. And you have to engage those that are going to buy.
Just before you go, what do you think about the president's directive that MDAs must buy CNG vehicles now?
Now, this is a pronouncement from the president, and it is serious. So we need to see how we are going to turn it positively. And that's one thing that the private sector in Nigeria, particularly the manufacturing sector, is good at doing. So we're ready to support the federal government because, I mean, that is what is globally recognized now, that you need to move towards more environmentally friendly kind of fuel. But then I believe that coming from the president, it will mean that his lieutenants will double back to be able to see how to implement it and what are the things you needed to do. One, there are local manufacturers that assemble vehicles, and those ones were incentivized and deliberately, intentionally brought into being by government. So, and there are policies the automobile industry has established how it is done, and you will clear the CKD and the SKDs that will bring it to assemble through the customs, a government agency. So all of them, we have to double back to queue behind Mr. President to ensure that one, the sector and the policy is supported to retrofit with the kits that are required. That means we have to do something about the exchange rate and the clearing process that will allow them to quickly bring it, because when the president speaks, it comes into effect virtually immediately. And so that means that immediate actions have to be taken to address that. There's also the issue of the infrastructure to be able to feed that policy. It means we will need stations where gas can be dispensed effectively for our government vehicles to be able to move. There are also existing manufacturers that need to sit at the table, and I think this is job for the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment. Needs to sit with all those who operate in that, say, look, this is what Mr. President wants. We see it as a laudable process, but how do we give effect to it? And we start a conversation that will allow that process to walk through and ensure that the domestic assemblers, and that is critically important, and is in line with President Tinubu's agenda, that we are not shortchanged. So we don't look forward to the importation of fully built CNG receiving vehicles. We want the local industries to retrofit for those ones that have not been set up to run on gas, so that they will be able to deliver. We do not expect 100% importation of those. And I believe that the president can make it happen.
We'll see how the ministers run with this directive and what the state governors themselves do moving forward, because if the president has said it, what about the state governors? What are they doing to ensure that the private sector in those states also thrive? We have to thank you for coming on this morning. Mr. Segun Ajayi is the DG Manufacturers Association of Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
All right.